Hi there, history fans. So today we're continuing with the Epic History TV series called Napoleonic Wars, and today we have the Battle of Wagram, 1809, where the Austrian army was, spoiler alert, defeated from the French. As we saw, there was a battle at the same year, the Battle of Aspern, where the Austrians defeated the French, but it didn't took long for Napoleon to, revenge himself, as it states here. Okay, as always, I'm gonna give some additional thoughts, opinions, infos. If you want to correct me, add something, or whatever, just let me know in the comment section below. Grab your popcorn, coffee, tea, whatever you're drinking, eating, whatever. And as always, the original video is going to be in the description below. Give them a view and a like, because Epic History TV deserves it. Okay, let's jump into the video.
An Epic History TV History March collaboration. In May 1809, the Austrians had defeated Napoleon's army in the bloody Battle of Aspern.
Yep.
His enemies took heart. After years of French military dominance, it seemed the tide was turning at last. 3 weeks later, Pope Pius VII excommunicated Napoleon for annexing papal land. Another propaganda coup for his enemies. But in the wake of its victory, Austria hesitated, not sure whether to seek peace or continue the war, while Napoleon responded with a hurricane of activity. He summoned reinforcements to join him near Vienna, the Army of Italy under his stepson Eugène de Beauharnais, and 11th Corps under Marshal Marmont, who'd together driven Archduke John's Austrian army out of North Italy, as well as Marshal Bernadotte's Saxon 9th Corps.
Just a quick note, so the tactic of the Austrians and the Prussians, although the Prussians are technically not at war with France, but they're still, like plotting and waiting for the right moment to intervene. But Austrians are left alone in this war, in this time period. Only the Brits are kind of trying to join them in this battle, but they're still hesitating to join in and to embark an amphibious, what is it called, like invasion of France and the Netherlands in the north. But yeah, Austrians are technically fighting Napoleon on their own, but the main tactics of the Austrians is to convince the German lands, so all the satellite states, the states that Napoleon like he used Tetris, like just made new lands and so on. They trying to convince other Germans that they should fight with them against Napoleon, because they're German, they're speaking the same language, they have the same culture and so on. But it doesn't fall on fertile land. So most of the Germans that are living in the Confederation of the Rhine, they're still on the side of Napoleon.
As well as Marshal Bernadotte's Saxon 9th Corps. Napoleon's army grew from 90,000 to a massive 164,000 men and 544 guns, to take on Charles's army of 128,000 and 414 guns.
Outnumbered.
6 weeks after his first attempt had ended in defeat, Napoleon ordered his army to cross the river once more. This time his engineers had built solid bridges across the Danube to ensure there was,
trust me, I'm a French engineer,
no repeat of the disasters of Aspern.
Yeah.
For the French army, Napoleon declared, the Danube no longer exists. The stage was set for the largest battle yet seen in European history. If you think our Napoleon series has made you a master of tactics and strategy, put your skills to the test in Vikings War
I'm just gonna make it a little bit okay, so yeah, the Battle of Wagram, I think that it was one, as far as I know, when I talk to colleagues and people around Europe, like Wagram is one of the battles that always comes when people are learning about Napoleon, because as he stated, it was one of the biggest battles, and he technically kicked out Austrian power and he even took lands from them. I mean, big chunks of lands from them. They would lose parts to Poland, the Duchy of Warsaw. They would lose parts to Bavaria, which is one of Austrians, like historical lands, which is Salzburg. They would also lose Dalmatia, Istria, and so on. So it was a big battle with a lot of what is it called? A lot of things that happened with the Treaty of Schönbrunn later on. But yeah. Jokester.
On the evening of the 4th of July, in heavy rain, the French began crossing from the island of Lobau, not towards the devastated villages of Aspern and Essling, but east towards Groß-Enzersdorf, which was soon ablaze from French shells.
And as I said, if you want to visit the Battle of Aspern, you need to go to Vienna, because Aspern and Essling, Aspern und Essling, they're part of Vienna now, because the city expanded throughout history.
Archduke Charles had left only a small advance guard to delay the French. By dawn, General Massena's 4th Corps and Oudinot's 2nd Corps were driving those troops back, winning space for the French army to deploy. At 1 p.m, Napoleon was ready to begin his advance across 6 miles of flat cornfields towards the main Austrian position, an escarpment known as the Wagram, 100 meters behind the Russbach stream. As General Lasalle's light cavalry and Massena's 4th...
Yeah, one interesting thing also about Wagram. Wagram is actually, as he said, it's not a place. You can see here Deutsch Wagram, but it's not a place or a village like Aspern, it's just a region over here.
Corps swung left to guard the flank. Oudinot's 2nd Corps and Davout's 3rd Corps advanced towards the Wagram. Bernadotte's Saxon Corps and Eugene's Army of Italy filled the centre. At 6 p.m, unsure of the enemy's strength, Napoleon ordered a full-scale assault against the Wagram plateau. But his troops met determined Austrian resistance along the line. By dusk, the Saxon 9th Corps had pushed into the village of Deutsch Wagram. The Saxon infantry wore white uniforms, like the Austrians, and as darkness fell, were mistaken for the enemy, fired on by friendly units. The Saxons panicked and fled with heavy losses. Napoleon's attempt at a quick breakthrough had failed. That night, both armies slept in the open, while Charles and Napoleon planned their next moves. On the 2nd day, Napoleon planned for Davout's 3rd Corps to lead the attack, rolling up the Austrian flank, while his other corps pinned down the enemy with local attacks. But to the Emperor's fury, he learned that overnight, without orders, Marshal Bernadotte had withdrawn his battered Saxons from Aderklaa, which the Austrians now occupied. Aderklaa was a crucial strongpoint in the centre of the battlefield. Napoleon gave orders for its immediate recapture, but the French and Saxon attack failed, with heavy losses. The Austrians had their own problems. Archduke Charles, knowing he faced a superior enemy, had decided his only chance of victory lay in an all-out dawn attack. He was relying on his...
I'm still questioning, why didn't the Austrians try to defend... Why didn't the Austrians try to defend like this part where Aspern is? I mean, it would be probably also a big moral boost to their troops, because, like, we won here, we're going to win again. Why did they fall back and let, like, this open flat land to the French to, because they can redeploy and they can more easily overlook all you know, like all the parts of the battlefield. I'm not sure why they retreated to this
His brother, Archduke John, reaching him with 13,000 reinforcements, in time to support the attack on the left. But by dawn, there was still no sign of him. What's more, as 4th Corps began its assault on Grosshofen, on time, 3rd Corps, which had received its orders late, was still getting into position, holding up the entire Austrian right wing.
Not good.
Charles had to tell 4th Corps to abort its unsupported attack until the other corps were ready. With the Austrians paralysed by delays, at 10 AM, Davout began his attack.
Oh, a counter.
A fierce infantry battle erupted in the village of Markgraf Neusiedl, while in the fields, dragoons and hussars fought a giant whirling cavalry battle, as each side tried to outflank the other. Davout's corps took the village, though they couldn't stop the Austrians withdrawing to a strong new position on the Wagram escarpment. Meanwhile, a serious threat had developed to Napoleon's left flank and rear. Klenau's 6th Corps had driven back the outnumbered French, with some units advancing as far as Essling, dangerously close to Napoleon's vital river crossings.
Nice.
Napoleon urgently needed to reinforce his left flank, but he was also determined to hold back his reserves for a decisive attack. So he ordered Massena's 4th Corps to march across the battlefield and reinforce the left. A huge redeployment like this, right in front of the enemy, was high risk. So Marshal Bessieres was ordered to lead a cavalry attack straight against the enemy centre. Casualties were high. Even Marshal Bessieres had his horse killed under him, to the alarm of his men. But the enemy was kept busy, while 4th Corps completed its redeployment and forced Klenau's corps to fall back.
Dead by 30. I would be interested. Try to find out somewhere on the internet what was like the time that a soldier in the French army would last until he was eventually killed on battle. Like 2 years, 3 years. I'm kind of really interested.
Napoleon now assembled a grand battery of more than 80 cannon in the center of the battlefield.
Because I don't think that life expectancy in the French army was that high, because they were constantly fighting on different fronts. You know, like you didn't have, I don't know, let's not fight for a year or two. It's always, you're deployed here, you're deployed there, you're fighting here and there. So
this was one of Napoleon's trademark tactics, a concentration of artillery to blast the enemy line and pave the way for a decisive French attack. The Grand Battery fired an estimated 15,000 rounds, setting light to the cornfields. Around 1 PM, Napoleon ordered a general attack. As Davout continued to batter at the enemy flank, 4th Corps would advance on the left, 2nd Corps on the right, while in the centre, General MacDonald would lead forward 8,000 men of the Army of Italy, formed up in a giant three-sided square to secure his flanks. But despite the terrible French cannonade, Austrian 3rd Corps and Grenadiers of the Reserve met the French advance with torrential fire. MacDonald's giant square was cut to pieces, its men mowed down en masse by cannon fire, and the attack stalled. But the Austrian army, battered by relentless French attacks, was near breaking point.
Just look at how big the front is. Imagine yourself being either one of those two commanders, and you need to look over the whole front from here to there. It's crazy. But as we talked in previous videos, one of the main things that the French were which was like kind of an advantage for the French, is that they had small units that could operate on their own. So, you know, like you would just send a general message to them, you know, like, hey, advance to the west or to the east or whatever. But they would decide on their own what's the best way to kind of push those troops, you know, like you didn't need to tell them, hey, you need to attack here and then move left and then attack right or whatever. Although I'm not sure about the Austrian army, but I think that the Austrian army, although they had that military reform back then, before the Battle of Aspern and Wagram, that they were more strict and rigorous on their chain of command.
Every part of the line was under pressure from the French. Archduke Charles, determined above all to keep his army intact, ordered a retreat. The Austrian withdrawal was disciplined and well executed. Napoleon had his victory. But his army was also so shattered by fatigue and heavy losses, it was unable to launch any effective pursuit.
Nice.
The Battle of Wagram was a brutal slugging match, the biggest and bloodiest battle yet seen in European history. French victory came at unprecedented cost. An estimated 37,500 casualties against 41,500 Austrian.
Just look at the
4
numbers.
days later, French troops.
Wait, sorry. Oh, where is it? Just look at the casualties. I mean, it's crazy. It's really crazy. But you need to take into account that both of those armies, the French army, but also the Austrian army, was a multi-ethnical, or, you know, like they had people from all around Europe. The French had Italians, Germans, French, and so on and so on. The Austrians had, of course, all the different ethnicities that they had under their control. So they had Slovenes, Croats, Hungarians, Austrians, Czechs, and so on. So this is really on a big scale, on a really big scale. It makes my skin, you know, like, or what is it called, like, bruh. It's really crazy.
1,500 Austrian. 4 days later, French troops caught up with the retreating Austrians at Znaim. As the fighting escalated, Charles knew he could not withstand the French a second time and asked for a ceasefire. But he had not consulted his older brother, Emperor Francis, who was furious when he heard the news. Not least because long-awaited British support was finally on the way.
Yeah, they were
3 weeks after the Battle of Znaim, the largest amphibious force Britain had ever assembled, 35 ships of the line and 39,000 troops, landed at Walcheren Island on the Scheldt estuary. Its aim was to destroy French shipping and naval stores. But following the successful bombardment and capture of Vlissingen, British commanders let the initiative slip from their grasp. Their force was bottled up by French troops on the marshy Dutch coast, where it was decimated by fever and dysentery. About 4,000 died. Many more became permanent invalids. The survivors were evacuated back to England in December.
I don't know much about this expeditionary force, so let me know in the comment section if you kind of researched about this. I only know that the British embarked like on the coastline, but not about the fighting and what happened exactly there, so let me know.
Emperor Francis, informed of the British debacle and persuaded by his generals that Austria couldn't fight on, made peace with Napoleon.
Yeah.
In October, Austria signed the Treaty of Schönbrunn, giving up territory to the French Empire, Bavaria, Saxony, the Duchy of Warsaw, and Russia. In total, the Austrian Empire...
Yeah, this is huge. Okay, so as you can see, Austria lost a ton of territory. So this is the territory of today's modern Croatia. So they lost, like Dalmatia, Istria. They also lost Slovenian lands, but they also lost a big port or a big city on the coastline, Trieste, and Rijeka, Fiume, whatever you want to call it, but Rijeka, let's call it Rijeka. But they lost, like the exit to the Mediterranean through the Adriatic Sea. They also lost the Duchy of Salzburg, which is one of the, like oldest land that the Austrians had. They lost it to Bavaria, which was the ally of Napoleon. Parts of Bohemia to Saxony. Saxony was one of the richest or more, prosperous German territories, but they also lost parts of Bohemia, which was also one of the oldest territories that the Austrians kind of gained control over. And they lost huge parts to the Duchy of Warsaw, which, more and more pushed to the Poles to the side of Napoleon, and their willingness to fight for Napoleon because they, believed in an independent Poland and so on. And we all know about the 3 partitions of Poland before the Napoleonic Wars. And they also lost parts of Galicia to Russia. I mean, that part isn't, I wouldn't say important, but not that much talked about. But most of the territory that is most talked about, like in Croatia and in Austria, is the loss of the Duchy of Salzburg and the loss of the coastline and the establishment of the Illyrian provinces to France. And when those territories were established, the Illyrian provinces, they would go through an, I wouldn't say economic rebirth or renaissance or whatever, but a lot of schools, a lot of roads were constructed. Of course, the Code Napoleon was implemented there. And, in Croatia, when you talk about the Illyrian provinces and the establishment of them, they were mostly seen as something positive. But yeah.
Duchy of Warsaw and Russia. In total, the Austrian Empire was stripped of 3.5 million subjects, forced to pay an indemnity, limit its army to 150,000 men, and join Napoleon's continental system, which meant ending all trade with British ships and merchants. Archduke Charles, meanwhile, one of Napoleon's more skilled opponents, had fallen out so bitterly with his brother, Emperor Francis, that he never held active command again.
Did you know that Napoleon was almost assassinated in Schönbrunn at the treaty? Look up Stubbs, Friedrich Stubbs. He was the guy who tried to assassinate Napoleon when the treaty was happening in 1809. An interesting story. He wanted to stab him with a knife. But yeah, I'm gonna come back to what the treaty also meant to Austria.
Napoleon had won another crushing victory. But there were worrying signs for the French emperor. His enemies were learning, while he would increasingly have to rely on young conscripts to fill the gaps left by veterans killed or wounded on campaign. Few could have guessed in 1809, but Napoleon had just fought his last victorious campaign. You can now support Epic History TV by shopping for
Shout out to their patrons. Okay, so the thing is also important, really important. Austria openly defined France, and you can see that they fought against them like in a conventional war. But after the defeat at Wagram, the Austrians changed their tactic, and maybe one of the most influential people or politicians at that time period was Clemens von Metternich. Metternich. He was the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Austria, and then later on Chancellor of Austria from 1821 to the revolutionary year of 1848. But he changed the tactic of Austria. He said, okay, we don't want an open defiance to France, but we will use the tactics of détente, so to relax tensions, but plot in the behinds. And one of the earliest signs of that political tactic of détente was actually marrying Marie-Louise, which was the sister of the Austrian Empire, to Napoleon, Marie-Louise, to, strengthen the bond with the French and, hey, don't attack us, your wife is from Austria and whatever. But yeah, Austrians eventually also joined the Russian campaign. And as he said, the big problem for Napoleon was that with the time, all his most experienced veteran troops, French troops, which were there from, the start of the French Revolution, are either, eliminated on the battlefield, wounded, they couldn't serve, they had fever and so on. So all the time he needed to replace all the big casualty numbers with new conscripts who weren't that, well versed in warfare tactics and so on. But he also needed to replenish his army, and he did it even more and more with other ethnicities from other, European states, from Polish troops, Italian troops, German troops, and so on. And as far as I know, I'm not sure, but prove me wrong or tell me if I'm wrong on that. But when Napoleon actually invaded Russia, I think 1/3 or 1/4 of his army, or the army of the Grande Armée, was actually from German lands, so ethnically Germans. 1/3 or 1/4 or something like that. Okay, I hope that you enjoyed it. As always, if you want to be part of our history community, we're now at 5,500 strong, growing strong in numbers. If you want to join it, just hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you get notified when new videos come out. And until the next time, see ya.